My daughter-in-law asked to store a suitcase in my garage. She said it contained items for donation, so I believed her without question. Later, my son asked me if I had seen that bag anywhere. I lied. After he left, I opened it and screamed in horror. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The September afternoon light filtered through the kitchen curtains of my farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, casting long shadows across the worn oak table where I'd prepared thousands of meals over 40 years. I was 63 years old, a widow of 2 years, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about my family. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday. My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, arrived unannounced around 3 in the afternoon, driving that expensive silver SUV my son Marvin had bought her last Christmas. I was in the garden, deadheading the roses that still bloomed stubbornly despite the approaching autumn chill. "Nita?" she called out, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness that always made me slightly uneasy. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Of course not, dear." I wiped the dirt from my hands on my apron and walked toward her. Rebecca was immaculate as always, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, her athletic wear probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. She opened the back of her vehicle and pulled out a large blue suitcase. It looked old, worn at the corners, with a distinctive brass lock that seemed out of place on such a shabby piece of luggage. "I have a huge favor to ask," she said, rolling the suitcase toward my detached garage. "I'm doing a big donation drive for the church, and our storage unit is completely full. Would you mind terribly if I left this here for just a week or two? It's just clothes and household items for families in need." Something in her eyes didn't match her words. A flicker of something desperate, almost frightened. But I dismissed it immediately. This was Rebecca, my son's wife of 8 years, mother of my only grandchild, Emma. Why would she lie to me? "Of course," I said. "You can put it in the back corner of the garage, behind the old garden furniture." She moved quickly, almost too quickly, wheeling it into the dim space. I noticed she was careful to position it in the darkest corner, behind several boxes and a tarp-covered workbench. "Thank you so much, Nita. You're a lifesaver." She kissed my cheek, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume. "Please don't mention this to Marvin. You know how he gets about clutter, even charity items. He'd just lecture me about organization." That should have been my first warning. But I simply nodded, watching as she drove away with unusual haste, her tires kicking up gravel from my driveway. I returned to my roses, pruning and tying back the climbing varieties that threatened to overtake the trellis. The afternoon passed peacefully. I made myself a simple dinner of soup and bread, watched the evening news, and settled into my usual routine. The blue suitcase sat forgotten in my garage, just another item in a space filled with the accumulated debris of a long life. 3 days later, Marvin arrived. My son was 34 years old, successful in commercial real estate, always dressed in crisp shirts even on weekends. He had his father's strong jaw and serious eyes, but lately I'd noticed new lines around his mouth, a tension in his shoulders that worried me. "Mom," he said, barely greeting me before he started pacing my living room. "Has Rebecca been here recently?" "She stopped by a few days ago," I said carefully. "Why? Is something wrong? Did she leave anything here? A suitcase, maybe? Blue, kind of old-looking?" My heart began to beat faster. The urgency in his voice alarmed me. "Why are you asking?" "Mom, please, this is important. Did she leave a blue suitcase here?" I made a split-second decision that would change everything. "No," I lied. "I haven't seen any suitcase." The relief on his face was immediate and obvious, which only deepened my confusion. Okay, good. If you do see it, or if Rebecca brings anything here, call me immediately. Don't open it. Don't move it. Just call me." "Marvin, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd made since childhood when anxious. "It's complicated. Rebecca and I are going through some things. I can't explain right now, but I need you to trust me. If that suitcase shows up, I need to know." After he left, I stood at my kitchen window, watching his car disappear down the long driveway lined with maple trees. My hands were shaking. In 43 years of marriage to his father, and in the 34 years I'd been Marvin's mother, I'd never lied to him. not once. But something in Rebecca's desperation, and something in Marvin's barely controlled panic, told me that whatever was in that garage involved a truth I wasn't ready to share with either of them. Not yet. I waited until dark. The farmhouse creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that usually comforted me. Tonight they made me feel watched. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and walked across the yard to the garage. The September night air was cool, carrying the scent of harvested fields from neighboring farms. Crickets chirped in the tall grass by the fence. Normal sounds. A normal night. But my heart hammered in my chest as I unlocked the garage door. The suitcase sat exactly where Rebecca had left it, partially hidden in the shadows. I pulled it out into the center of the space, under the single bulb that hung from the ceiling. The brass lock gleamed dully in the weak light. For a long moment, I simply stared at it. Once I opened this, there would be no going back. Whatever secret Rebecca had hidden here, whatever had made Marvin so desperate to find it, would become my burden too. But I was 63 years old, and I'd learned long ago that ignorance was rarely a blessing. I'd watched too many women of my generation close their eyes to uncomfortable truths, and I'd promised myself after my husband died that I would never be that woman. The lock was old but sturdy. I tried it gently. To my surprise, it clicked open. Either Rebecca had forgotten to secure it properly, or she'd trusted that I wouldn't look. I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was money. Stacks and stacks of cash, bundled with rubber bands. $100 bills mostly, arranged in neat piles. My throat went dry. I'd never seen so much money in one place in my entire life. But beneath the money, there were documents. I pulled out the first folder with trembling fingers. Inside were property deeds, multiple properties, none of which I recognized. And the names on the deeds were not Marvin Jordan or Rebecca Jordan. They were variations. Marvin Whitman, Marvin White, Mark Jordan, Rebecca Stone, Rebecca Mason. My son's face stared up at me from a driver's license that bore his photograph but a completely different name. Another license showed Rebecca with dark hair instead of blonde, under a name I'd never heard. There were more documents underneath, bank statements from accounts in the Cayman Islands, incorporation papers for businesses I'd never heard Marvin mention. And then, at the very bottom, a manila envelope sealed with red wax. I broke the seal with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a news article from 7 years ago. The headline made my blood run cold. Real estate fraud investigation, millions missing in investment scheme. And there, in the grainy photograph accompanying the article, was my son. Younger, different haircut, but unmistakably Marvin. Standing next to him was Rebecca, her arm linked through his, both of them smiling at some gala event. The article named them as persons of interest in a fraud case in Arizona. Investors had lost their life savings. Elderly victims had been specifically targeted. The case had gone cold when the primary suspects disappeared. I sat down hard on an old garden chair, the document fluttering in my shaking hands. My son, my Marvin, who I'd raised to be honest, to be good. The boy who'd cried when he accidentally broke his sister's toy, who'd volunteered at the animal shelter in high school, who'd been his father's pride and joy. That boy had become a man who stole from elderly people, who'd built a life on lies and false identities, who was apparently still running. And Rebecca had hidden the evidence here, in my garage, on my property, making me an accomplice whether I knew it or not. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. I needed to think. I needed to understand. But most of all, I needed to know the complete truth before I decided what to do next. I closed the suitcase carefully, exactly as I'd found it, and returned it to its shadowy corner. But I took the manila envelope with me, tucked into my cardigan. Back in the house, I locked every door and window, something I rarely did out here in the countryside. Then I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope in front of me, and began to plan. If my son was a criminal, I needed to know everything. And if he wasn't, if there was some explanation I couldn't yet see, I needed that too. But I would uncover the truth carefully, quietly, using the one advantage I had that no one would suspect. I was just an old widow on a farm. No one paid attention to old women. No one saw us as threats. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption could be. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my computer, the one my daughter Sarah had set up for me last Christmas, teaching me how to Google things, as she'd called it. She'd laughed at how slowly I typed, how I squinted at the screen. She wouldn't be laughing if she could see me now, searching through news archives with the focused intensity of a woman who'd just discovered her entire understanding of her family was built on lies. The Arizona fraud case was worse than I'd imagined. Much worse. I found article after article, each one making my stomach churn. The scheme had been sophisticated, targeting retirees across the Southwest. Marvin and Rebecca, operating under the names Mark Whitman and Rebecca Stone, had promised guaranteed returns on real estate investments. They'd held seminars at community centers and retirement homes, showing glossy presentations about ground floor opportunities in developing properties. 23 victims. Life savings wiped out. One elderly man had attempted suicide when he realized his retirement fund was gone. A widow had lost her late husband's insurance money. The total loss was estimated at over $4 million. The investigation had been active for 6 months before the suspects vanished. No arrests were ever made. The case went cold in 2018, 7 years ago. Right around the time Marvin had relocated from Phoenix to Pennsylvania, claiming he'd found better opportunities in the East Coast real estate market. Right around the time he'd introduced us to Rebecca, his new girlfriend, who'd supposedly grown up in Vermont. I printed everything I could find, watching the pages stack up on my desk. My hands were steadier now, the initial shock giving way to something harder, more determined. If my son was guilty, I needed to know why. And if there was any chance he'd been coerced or manipulated, I needed to find that too. But I had to be careful. Very careful. The next morning, I drove into town. Something I did twice a week anyway for groceries and errands. No one would think anything of it. But instead of going to the supermarket, I went to the public library. Martha Henderson was at the desk, the same woman who'd been the head librarian for 30 years. She smiled when she saw me. "Nita? Haven't seen you in a while. Looking for a good mystery novel?" "Actually, Martha, I'm trying to track down some information about property records. My late husband made some investments years ago, and I'm trying to organize his papers." It was a believable lie. Widows were always dealing with their husband's paperwork. Martha directed me to the reference section and showed me how to access the county property database. "Just let me know if you need help, dear." I spent 3 hours there, searching through records. What I found made the sick feeling in my stomach intensify. Marvin and Rebecca owned 5 properties in the county. Not unusual for someone in real estate. But 3 of them were listed under variations of their names. Marvin Whitman owned a commercial building downtown. Mark White owned a rental property near the college. Rebecca Mason owned a small apartment complex. They were still doing it. Still using multiple identities. Still hiding assets. But why? If they'd successfully disappeared and reinvented themselves 7 years ago, why continue the deception? Unless they were still running the same scheme. Unless they'd never stopped. I printed the records, paid my small fee, and left the library with a folder full of evidence hidden in my canvas shopping bag. That's when I saw her. Rebecca, coming out of the coffee shop across the street, talking on her phone. She looked agitated, gesturing with her free hand. I ducked into the hardware store, watching through the window as she paced back and forth on the sidewalk. She was too far away for me to hear, but her body language screamed distress. Finally, she got into her SUV and drove off, faster than necessary, her tires squealing slightly as she turned the corner. I waited 5 minutes before leaving the hardware store, purchasing a pack of light bulbs I didn't need to justify my presence. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Marvin. "Mom, I need to ask you something." His voice was tight, controlled. "Have you noticed anyone unusual around the farm? Any strangers? Any cars you don't recognize?" "No," I said slowly. "Why? What's going on?" "Probably nothing. Just, if you do see anything odd, call me immediately. And Mom, make sure you're locking your doors at night." "Marvin, you're scaring me again. Please tell me what this is about." "I can't. Not yet. Just trust me, okay? I'm trying to protect you. Protect me. The irony was suffocating. He was protecting me from threats created by his own criminal activities, all while having no idea that I knew the truth. Are you in trouble? I asked quietly. The silence on the other end lasted too long. Everything's going to be fine, Mom. I promise. I just need you to be careful for a little while. After he hung up, I sat in my car in the library parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My son was in danger. Whatever he and Rebecca had been running from for 7 years had apparently found them, and the evidence was sitting in my garage. I drove home slowly, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The country roads were empty, as they usually were, but every distant car made my pulse quicken. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The garage door was slightly ajar. I knew I'd closed it, locked it, I was certain. I sat in my car, engine running, phone in my hand. Should I call Marvin? The police? But what would I tell them? That I'd hidden evidence of a crime in my garage, lied to my son about it, and now someone might have broken in? No. I needed to see for myself first. I grabbed the tire iron from my trunk, feeling slightly ridiculous. I was a 63-year-old woman with arthritis in my left hip. What did I think I was going to do with it? But I held it anyway as I approached the garage. The door swung open easily. Inside, everything looked normal. The workbench, the garden furniture, the boxes. I moved toward the back corner, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The blue suitcase was gone. I stood there, staring at the empty space where it had been, my mind racing. Rebecca must have come back for it. Or Marvin had found it somehow. Or someone else, someone connected to the Arizona case, had tracked them here and taken it. But if someone had broken in and stolen it, they now had evidence that had been hidden on my property. Evidence that could implicate me as an accomplice, even though I'd known nothing about it when Rebecca first stored it here. I was about to leave when I noticed something I'd missed before. A small piece of paper, wedged between 2 boxes where the suitcase had been. I pulled it out carefully. It was a receipt, dated 3 days ago. A storage unit rental, paid in cash, in the name of R. Mason, one of Rebecca's aliases. And there was an address. Mountain View Storage, Route 47, Unit 23B. Someone had left this deliberately. But who? And why? I tucked the receipt into my pocket and returned to the house, locking every door behind me. I needed to think. I needed a plan. That evening, Sarah called. My daughter lived 2 hours away in Philadelphia, worked as a nurse, had 2 teenagers and a husband who traveled for work. We talked every few days, usually about ordinary things. Her kids, her job, my garden. Mom, have you talked to Marvin lately? She asked, after the usual pleasantries. He stopped by a few days ago. Why? He called me yesterday, asking if I'd talk to you, if you seemed okay. He sounded weird, stressed. Is something going on? I made a decision. Sarah, if I needed to find out information about someone, but I couldn't let them know I was looking, how would I do it? There was a pause. Mom, that's oddly specific. Are you investigating someone? Just curious. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, I'd say be very careful. But if you really needed to, you could check social media, public records, maybe hire a private investigator if it was serious enough. Mom, seriously, what's this about? Nothing important, just a neighbor situation. I should go, dear. Talk to you soon. I hung up before she could press further. Sarah was sharp. She'd inherited her father's analytical mind. If I talked too long, she'd sense something was wrong. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak made me tense. Every distant sound of a car on the main road made me wonder if someone was coming. I thought about the receipt in my pocket, about the storage unit that Rebecca had rented under a false name, about the missing suitcase and whoever had taken it. And I thought about my son, the little boy who'd held my hand on his first day of kindergarten, who'd graduated top of his class, who'd given the eulogy at his father's funeral with tears streaming down his face. Where had that boy gone? When had he become this man? Tomorrow, I decided, I would go to that storage unit. I would find out what else Rebecca was hiding. and I would begin to piece together the full truth, no matter how painful it might be, because I was his mother. And whether Marvin was a victim or a criminal, whether he deserved my protection or my condemnation, I needed to know everything before I decided what to do next. Outside my window, a car drove slowly past my property. Too slowly. It didn't stop, but I heard the engine idle for a moment near the end of my driveway before continuing on. I got out of bed and checked every lock again. Then, I pulled out the folder of printed articles from under my mattress and read through them one more time, memorizing details, looking for clues I might have missed. The elderly man who'd attempted suicide was named Robert Pratt. He'd been 72 years old, a retired teacher. He'd lost $200,000, his entire retirement fund that he'd spent 40 years building. I stared at his photograph in the article. He looked kind. He looked like someone who'd trusted easily, who'd believed in people. He looked like he could have been my late husband. And my son had done that to him. Or had he? Was there more to this story? I put the papers away and turned off the light. Tomorrow would bring answers. It had to. But first, I had to survive the night, knowing that someone was watching my house, that the evidence was gone, and that both my son and daughter-in-law were desperate enough to lie, hide, and run, and knowing that I was now caught in the middle of whatever was coming next, whether I wanted to be or not. I waited until mid-morning when traffic would be normal and my visit wouldn't seem suspicious. Mountain View Storage was a 20-minute drive, located off Route 47 in a semi-industrial area I rarely visited. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence with rows of orange metal units stretching back from the main office. I parked near the entrance and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. What was I doing? Breaking into a storage unit rented under a false name. This was so far outside my normal life that I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But then I thought of Robert Pratt, the retired teacher who'd lost everything. I thought of the other 22 victims. And I thought of my son, who either needed to be stopped or saved. The office was small, overheated, and smelled of stale coffee. A young man with a patchy beard sat behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. I'd prepared my story on the drive over. "Yes, I'm here to access Unit 23B. My daughter rented it, Rebecca Mason, but she's out of town and asked me to pick up some items for her." He glanced at his computer. "Got ID?" My heart sank. Of course they'd need identification. I'd been foolish to think this would be easy. "I'm afraid I left my purse in the car," I said, injecting just the right amount of elderly confusion into my voice. "But she told me the code for the lock. She said that would be sufficient." He sighed, clearly not wanting to deal with a confused older woman. "The code's not the issue, ma'am. I need to verify you're authorized. Security policy." "Of course, dear. Let me just call her." I pulled out my phone and pretended to dial, then held it to my ear. "Rebecca? Honey, I'm at the storage place, but they need—" "Oh, you're in a meeting? I understand." "Yes, I'll tell him." I looked at the young man with my most helpless expression. She's in an important meeting and can't talk, but she's very upset that I'm bothering her. She said she put my name on the authorization list. "Nita Jordan?" He scrolled through something on his screen, clearly wanting this interaction to end. "Look, I don't see your name here, but if you have the code, I guess it's fine. Unit 23B is in the back row, on the left. Just make sure you lock it when you're done." I thanked him profusely and drove my car around to the back of the facility, my hands trembling on the wheel. That had been too easy, which meant either the young man was incompetent or I was walking into a trap. Unit 23B was exactly where he'd said. I parked and looked around carefully. The facility seemed deserted, just rows of closed orange doors and silence. I approached the unit and examined the lock. It was a combination padlock, standard issue, but I didn't know the code. I stood there, feeling foolish. What had I expected? That Rebecca would have left it unlocked? I pulled out the receipt again, studying it more carefully. There were numbers at the bottom. Airweight 47. Worth a try. I entered the code. The lock clicked open. My breath caught. Someone had definitely left that receipt for me to find. But who? And why were they helping me? I rolled up the metal door, wincing at the loud screech it made. The unit was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, and it was packed with boxes, filing cabinets, and more blue suitcases identical to the one Rebecca had hidden in my garage. I stepped inside, pulling the door partially down behind me to avoid drawing attention. The first box I opened contained more cash, bundled and labeled with dates and names I didn't recognize. The second held files, organized meticulously by year. I pulled out a file from 2018. Inside were contracts, signed testimonials from satisfied investors, and promotional materials for something called Whitestone Property Development. The company name was a combination of their aliases. But what made my hands start shaking was the file from 2024. This year, they were still doing it, still running seminars, still targeting retirees. I found flyers for an event scheduled for next month at a community center in Harrisburg. "Guaranteed returns for your golden years," the headline proclaimed, with a photo of Marvin and Rebecca, professionally dressed, smiling confidently. Different names again. This time they were calling themselves Marvin and Rebecca Sterling. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly that some of the images came out blurred. Then I opened one of the filing cabinets. What I found inside made my heart stop. It was a ledger, handwritten, meticulously detailed. Names, amounts, dates, a record of every victim, every dollar stolen, going back 7 years. And the most recent entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, age 71. Amount, $145,000. Life insurance payout from deceased husband. I felt sick. While I'd been tending my garden and living my quiet life, my son had been systematically destroying other people's futures. Other mothers, other widows, people just like me. I was about to photograph the ledger when I heard voices outside. "Sure it was here?" "That's what the tracker said. The suitcase came to this location yesterday." My blood turned to ice. I'd been right. Someone had put a tracker in the original suitcase, and they'd followed it here. I pulled the door down as quietly as I could, leaving just enough gap to see through. 2 men stood near my car, both wearing dark suits despite the warm weather. They didn't look like police. They looked like the kind of men who solved problems outside the law. "Check with the office," one of them said. "Find out who rented this unit." I was trapped. My car was right there, clearly visible. They'd know someone was here. I looked around desperately for another exit, but storage units don't have back doors. Then I heard another voice, one I recognized with a jolt of shock. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" It was Rebecca. She walked around the corner, perfectly composed, her blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight. But everything about her body language had changed. This wasn't the sweet, slightly vapid daughter-in-law I knew. This woman moved with predatory confidence. "We're looking for property that belongs to our employer," one of the men said. "A blue suitcase that was tracked to this location." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Rebecca said smoothly. "This is a private storage facility. You're trespassing. We can come back with the police." "Please do. I'm sure they'd be very interested in why you're tracking stolen property." She smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Or we could avoid that unpleasantness, and you could leave. Now." The 2 men exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some calculation I couldn't read. Finally, they walked away, but not before one of them looked back at my car, memorizing the license plate. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard their vehicle start and drive away. Then Rebecca walked directly to Unit 23B and rolled up the door. "You can come out now, Nita." I stepped into the sunlight, my legs shaking. "You knew I was here." "Of course I did. I left the receipt for you to find. Though I expected you to be more careful about being followed." She looked at me with something like disappointment. "You parked right out front in broad daylight." "Really, Nita, I thought you were smarter than that." "You left the receipt? Why?" "Because I need your help. And because you need to understand what's really happening before Marvin does something catastrophically stupid." My head was spinning. "I know what you are, what you've both been doing. I found the articles about Arizona. I saw the ledger in there. You're thieves. You destroy people's lives." "Is that what you think?" Rebecca laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Nita, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. Yes, there was fraud in Arizona, but Marvin wasn't the one running it. I was. I stared at her. What? Sit down. You look like you're going to faint. She gestured to the concrete parking stop. I sat, my mind reeling. Rebecca remained standing, her arms crossed. 7 years ago, I was running one of the most successful investment schemes in the Southwest. Marvin was my mark. I targeted him specifically because he was exactly what I needed. A legitimate real estate agent with credentials, charm, and just enough ambition to be tempted. You're saying Marvin is innocent? Innocent? No. Complicit? Absolutely. But he didn't know it was fraud. Not at first. I convinced him we were running a legitimate development company. By the time he figured out the truth, we were both in too deep. The real people I was working for, the ones who financed the operation, don't let you just walk away. Those men who were just here work for Victor Kozlov. He bankrolled the Arizona scheme. When it collapsed and the investigation started, I took the money and ran. Brought Marvin with me because I needed his expertise to keep running smaller operations to pay Victor back. But I've never been able to pay him enough. He wants everything, plus 7 years of interest. My mind was racing, trying to reconcile this new information with everything I thought I knew. So the properties here, the new identities, the money in the suitcase, is how I've been keeping us alive, and keeping your son from ending up at the bottom of a river. Victor's people found us 3 weeks ago. They've been watching, waiting for me to lead them to the money. That's why I hid the suitcase with you. I thought your farm would be the last place they'd look. But Marvin came looking for it. Because he finally figured out what I've been doing, stealing from other retirees to pay back the debt. He's horrified, Nita. He wants to turn himself in, confess everything, even though it means prison. Even though it means Victor's people will kill him for cooperating with authorities. I stood up, anger finally cutting through my shock. So you want me to help you continue stealing from innocent people? To protect my son while you destroy other families? No. Rebecca's face was hard. I want you to help me end this, permanently. But to do that, you need to understand something else. Something Marvin doesn't know. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. It was a document, official-looking, with a government seal. I've been gathering evidence against Victor for 3 years. Everything he's done, everyone he's hurt. I've been an informant for the FBI since 2022. I stared at her. You're working with the FBI? Not officially. I approached them, offered to turn on Victor in exchange for immunity. But they needed more than just financial records. They needed something that would stick, that would take down his entire organization. So I've been playing both sides, stealing enough to keep Victor interested while documenting everything. Does Marvin know? No. And he can't know. Not yet. Because your son is terrible at hiding his emotions. If he knew I was an informant, Victor's people would see it on his face. They'd kill us both. I looked at this woman, my daughter-in-law, who I'd thought I knew. Everything about her was a lie. But which lie was the deepest? Was she really trying to make things right? Or was this just another manipulation? Why are you telling me this? Because Victor's patience has run out. He's demanding the rest of the money, all of it, in 3 days. And if I don't deliver, he'll kill Marvin first, to send a message. Then me, and possibly anyone else who might know where the money is. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. That includes you, Nita. The moment those men saw your car here, you became a target. So you can hate me. You can judge me for what I've done. But right now, we need each other. I need your help to protect Marvin. And you need mine to stay alive long enough to see this through. A car approached on the main road, slowing down. Rebecca immediately grabbed my arm. We need to leave, separately. Go home, act normal, and wait for my call. Don't tell Marvin any of this. Don't trust anyone except me. Why should I trust you? She pulled something from her pocket and pressed it into my hand. It was a business card with a phone number. If you don't believe me, call that number. Ask for Agent Marge Torres. Tell her Rebecca Mason sent you. She'll confirm everything I've told you. Then she was gone, walking quickly to her SUV and driving away. leaving me standing in the parking lot with a business card in my trembling hand and the horrifying knowledge that I was now involved in something far more dangerous than family secrets. I drove home in a daze, checking my mirrors constantly. Every car seemed suspicious. Every person seemed like a potential threat. When I finally reached my farmhouse, I sat in the driveway for a long moment, looking at the home I'd lived in for 40 years. It had always been my sanctuary, my safe place. Now it felt like a target. Inside, I locked every door and called the number on the card. A woman answered on the second ring. Torres. My name is Nita Jordan. Rebecca Mason told me to call you. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Jordan. I've been expecting your call. We need to meet. Tonight. And Mrs. Jordan? Don't tell anyone about this conversation. Not your son, not your daughter, not anyone. Your life depends on it. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, and realized with crystalline clarity that everything had changed. My son wasn't just a criminal. He was a victim, trapped in a web of corruption and violence. My daughter-in-law wasn't just a thief. She was an informant, playing the most dangerous game imaginable. And I, a 63-year-old widow who'd thought her most pressing problem was whether the roses would survive the first frost, was now caught in the middle of an FBI investigation involving Russian criminals and millions of stolen dollars. The phone in my hand buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 9 p.m., Oak Grove Cemetery. Come alone. Bring the ledger from the storage unit. I looked down and realized I was still clutching the handwritten ledger I'd taken from the filing cabinet. In my panic, I'd never put it back. And now, someone knew I had it. I had 6 hours before the cemetery meeting. 6 hours to decide whether I was brave or foolish, whether I should trust Rebecca or call the police, whether I should protect my son or protect myself. First, I needed to verify Rebecca's story. I called the number Agent Torres had given me again. Torres, this is Nita Jordan. You said we needed to meet. I want it to happen now, not tonight. I need answers before I do anything else. There was a pause then. Fair enough. There's a diner on Route 30, Miller's Family Restaurant. Can you be there in an hour? Yes. Come alone. If I see anyone following you, I'll abort and you'll never hear from me again. The line went dead. I changed into clean clothes, my hands still trembling. I felt like I was in someone else's life, playing a role in a movie I'd never auditioned for. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw something I hadn't expected. Determination. Yes, I was frightened. But I was also angry. Angry at being lied to, manipulated, and dragged into this nightmare. And I was my father's daughter. He'd served in Korea, come home, and never talked about the things he'd seen. But he'd taught me something important. When you're scared, you don't freeze. You think, you plan, and you act. The drive to the diner took 40 minutes. I spent them checking my mirrors obsessively, but if anyone was following me, they were better at it than I was at detecting them. Miller's Family Restaurant was a standard roadside diner, the kind with checkered floors and vinyl booths. I spotted Agent Torres immediately. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that had seen too much. She was sitting in a back booth, nursing a cup of coffee. When I approached, she gestured for me to sit without looking up. You weren't followed, she said. It wasn't a question. I had people watching the road. You're clean. Rebecca said you could verify her story. Rebecca Mason, also known as Rebecca Stone, Rebecca Sterling, and about 6 other names, has been a confidential informant for our office since October 2022. She approached us with evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise run by Viktor Kozlov and offered to continue gathering intelligence in exchange for immunity. So she's been stealing from people for you? Torres's jaw tightened. Not for us. Despite us. We've tried multiple times to shut down her operations, but she convinced her handlers that stopping her would alert Kozlov and destroy the larger investigation. It's been complicated. Complicated, I repeated bitterly. People like Patricia Hoffman lost their life savings while you were building a case. I know. Torres looked at me directly for the first time. And I hate it. But Mrs. Hoffman lost $145,000. Victor Kozlov's organization has laundered over $300 million in the past decade. Human trafficking, drugs, extortion, and yes, investment fraud on a massive scale. Rebecca's operation is a small piece of a much larger puzzle. Does Marvin know any of this? No. And that's actually been the biggest problem. Your son has been trying to make things right. He's been skimming money from Rebecca's operations, setting up anonymous payments to some of the Arizona victims. Small amounts, untraceable, but enough that Kozlov's people noticed discrepancies. My heart clenched. That was Marvin. That was the boy I'd raised, trying to fix things even when he was drowning. How much trouble is he in? Legally, he's facing multiple felony charges. But if he cooperates, testifies against Kozlov, we can negotiate a deal. Maybe 3 to 5 years instead of 15 to 20. But Mrs. Jordan, there's a bigger problem. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were surveillance photos. Marvin meeting with a man I didn't recognize. Rebecca talking to the same man. And most disturbing, photos of my farmhouse, taken from the road. That man is Alexei Petrov, Kozlov's primary enforcer in the Northeast. He's been in the country for 2 weeks, and his only job is to recover the money Rebecca stole and eliminate anyone who might testify against his boss. That includes your son and daughter-in-law. And as of this morning, it includes you. Because I was at the storage unit. Because Petrov's men saw you there and ran your plates. Now they know you're connected. They'll assume you know where the money is. Torres leaned forward. Mrs. Jordan, I need you to understand something. These aren't people who make threats. They don't negotiate. They solve problems permanently. You're in serious danger. Then protect me. Isn't that what the FBI does? We can. Witness protection, relocation, new identity. But you'd have to leave everything behind. Your home, your daughter, your friends, your entire life. And even then, Kozlov has resources that make complete protection difficult. I thought of Sarah, my grandchildren, the roses I'd planted with my late husband, the farmhouse where I'd raised my family. Leave it all behind because of choices Marvin and Rebecca had made? There's another option, Torres said quietly. Help us end this. Rebecca has been gathering evidence, but she's missing one critical piece: the location of Kozlov's primary accounts, the ones he uses to move the biggest money. We know he's been using your son's legitimate real estate business to launder funds, but we can't prove the direct connection. We need documents, transaction records, something that ties Kozlov directly to the properties Marvin manages. And you think I can get these documents? I think you have access Marvin trusts? He wouldn't suspect his own mother of investigating him. You could look through his files, his computer, his paperwork, find what we need, and we can move against Kozlov immediately, which means we can protect all of you before Petrov makes his move. I stared at her. You want me to spy on my own son. I want you to save your son's life, and your own. Torres's voice softened. Look, I understand this is horrible. You shouldn't be in this position. But you are. And the clock is ticking. Petrov gave Rebecca 3 days to produce the money. That was yesterday. So you have 48 hours before he starts killing people. A waitress approached, and we both fell silent until she refilled Torres's coffee and left. What about the meeting tonight? I asked. Someone texted me to bring the ledger to Oak Grove Cemetery. Torres frowned. What ledger? I pulled it from my bag. The handwritten record from the storage unit. It lists all of Rebecca's victims, amounts, dates. Torres went pale. She grabbed the ledger and flipped through it quickly, her expression darkening with each page. Rebecca never mentioned this. This is evidence of ongoing criminal activity. If Kozlov's people get this, they'll know exactly what she's been documenting. They'll know she's cooperating. So who sent the text? I don't know. But you can't go to that meeting. Torres pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Torres. I need a tactical team at Oak Grove Cemetery, Route 18, by 2100 hours. Full surveillance. Armed response ready. She hung up and looked at me. We'll have people there. If it's Petrov trying to trap you, we'll intercept. If it's someone else, we'll find out who. And if it's Rebecca? Then she has a lot of explaining to do about why she's operating outside her handler's knowledge. I left the diner feeling more frightened than when I'd arrived. Torres had given me a phone, a direct line to her team, and instructions to call immediately if anything unusual happened. She'd also made it clear that I had less than 2 days to decide: help them, enter witness protection, or take my chances on my own. None of those options seemed survivable. When I got home, there was a car in my driveway. Marvin's car. He was sitting on my porch steps, and when he saw me, he stood up quickly. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom, we need to talk. Come inside," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. In the kitchen, I made tea, my hands shaking as I filled the kettle. Marvin sat at the table, his head in his hands. "I've made terrible mistakes," he said quietly. "I've done things I'm ashamed of, and now I've put you in danger and I can't forgive myself for that." "Marvin, what's going on?" "The truth. All of it." He looked up at me, and I saw my little boy in his eyes, scared and desperate. 7 years ago, I fell in love with Rebecca. She was smart, beautiful, ambitious. She had this business plan for a real estate development company, and I thought we were going to build something legitimate together. But it wasn't legitimate. No. By the time I figured it out, we'd already taken money from investors. Rebecca kept telling me it was temporary, that we'd pay everyone back with the profits from the next development. But there was never a next development. It was always the next one, and the next one. And then people started losing their savings, and I realized what we'd become. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because Rebecca told me about Victor, about what he'd do to both of us if we cooperated with authorities. And because—" He paused, shame crossing his face. "Because I was a coward. I was terrified of prison, of losing everything. So I ran with her instead of facing what I'd done. And you've been running ever since." "Yes. But Mom, I can't do it anymore. I can't keep stealing from people to pay back a debt that will never be cleared. I can't keep lying to you, to Sarah, to everyone. I want to turn myself in. I want to face the consequences." My heart broke for him. This was the son I'd raised, the one who knew right from wrong, who was finally ready to do the hard thing. But Torres's words echoed in my mind. If he confesses, Petrov will kill him. "Marvin, have you told Rebecca this?" "Yes, last night. She went crazy, said I'd be signing both our death warrants. She left, and I haven't seen her since." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've disappointed you in ways I can never fix. But I need advice. What do I do?" I wanted to tell him everything. About Torres, about Rebecca being an informant, about the danger we were all in. But Torres had been explicit. Tell no one. Instead, I sat down across from him and took his hands. "Marvin, I need you to trust me. Don't do anything yet. Don't turn yourself in. Don't talk to the police. Don't contact Rebecca. Give me 48 hours. To do what? To help you. But I need you to trust me completely and follow my instructions exactly." He searched my face. "You know something. I know that you're my son, and I love you, and I'm going to do everything in my power to protect you, even if that means protecting you from yourself." After Marvin left, I sat alone in my kitchen as darkness fell outside. I had the ledger, evidence that could put Rebecca away forever. I had Torres's phone, a direct line to federal protection. I had Marvin's confession and his trust. And in 6 hours, I was supposed to meet someone at a cemetery, who might be friend or enemy, FBI or criminal, salvation or death. I made a decision then. I wouldn't go to the cemetery meeting, but I would do something else, something that terrified me even more. I would go to Marvin's office tonight, while he was home with Rebecca, and I would search his files. I would find the evidence Torres needed to connect Kozlov to the money laundering, and I would do it before anyone else got hurt. It was 6 p.m. I had 3 hours before the cemetery meeting that I wouldn't attend, and probably only a few hours before Marvin's office security system reset for the night. I changed into dark clothes, feeling ridiculous. I'd never broken into anywhere in my entire life. But then again, I'd never had to save my son from Russian criminals before. At 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. If you don't come to the cemetery, your daughter Sarah will receive copies of all your son's crimes. Every document, every victim, every dollar. She'll know everything, and she'll know you helped hide it. 9 p.m. Don't be late. My blood ran cold. They were threatening Sarah now. Threatening to destroy her relationship with her brother, to implicate me as an accomplice. Whoever was pulling these strings knew exactly how to manipulate me. And I realized with horrible clarity that I was running out of time, out of options, and out of people I could trust. I didn't go to Marvin's office, and I didn't go to the cemetery. Instead, I did something that no one would expect from a 63-year-old widow. I set a trap. The threat against Sarah had clarified everything. Whoever was sending those texts wasn't FBI. Torres would never threaten my family. It wasn't Kozlov's people. They didn't need leverage. They just acted. Which meant it was someone else. Someone who knew enough to be dangerous but needed me to make a mistake. I called Torres. The cemetery meeting is a setup. Someone's trying to force me into the open. We know. My team has been monitoring your phone. The texts are coming from a burner. But we've triangulated the location. Mrs. Jordan, where are you right now? Home. And I'm staying here. But I need you to do something for me. I explained my plan. Torres was silent for a long moment. That's extremely risky, she finally said. Everything is risky now. But I'm tired of being reactive. It's time to control this situation instead of letting it control me. You're sure about this? No. But I'm doing it anyway. After I hung up, I made 3 more calls. The first was to Marvin. Mom, what's wrong? I need you to come to the house tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. Bring Rebecca. Tell her it's important, that I found something she needs to see. What did you find? Just trust me, Marvin, and don't tell her what it is. Just say I insisted on meeting with both of you. The second call was to Sarah. Mom, it's late? Is everything okay? I need you to come home tomorrow morning. It's about your brother. What about him? Mom, you're scaring me. I can't explain over the phone. But Sarah, I need you here. 10 a.m. Can you do that? I have a shift. Call in sick, please. This is the most important thing I'll ever ask you to do. The urgency in my voice must have convinced her. Okay, I'll be there. The third call was the hardest. I dialed the number that had sent the threatening texts. It rang 4 times before someone answered. A man's voice, accent-free, cold. Mrs. Jordan, I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. Who are you? Someone who knows what your son has done. Someone who's been watching this family destroy itself with lies. You should have gone to the cemetery. I want to make a deal. He laughed. You're not in a position to negotiate. I have the ledger. The complete record of every victim, every dollar, every property. And I have documents from Marvin's office that connect Viktor Kozlov to the money laundering operation. You want those? Or you wouldn't be threatening me. Silence. Then, what do you want? A meeting. Tomorrow. My house. 10 a.m. You get everything. The ledger, the documents, all of it. But we do this face to face, and we do it my way. Why would I agree to that? Because if I don't call a specific number by 9 a.m. tomorrow, everything I have goes to the FBI, the IRS, and the Philadelphia Inquirer. You'll get nothing, and Kozlov will know you failed. Another pause. Who else will be there? My family. This ends tomorrow one way or another. 10 a.m. Come alone. I hung up before he could respond, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Then I called Torres back. He'll come. We'll have a team in position by dawn. Snipers on the ridge, agents in the barn, tactical unit on the access road. But Mrs. Jordan, you understand that you're making yourself bait? I understand. But I'm not just bait. I'm the trap. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the hours organizing every piece of evidence I'd gathered, arranging them in a specific order on my dining room table. The ledger, printouts from the Arizona investigation, property records, bank statements, and a few other items I'd collected over the past days that no one knew about. Because I'd been busy while everyone thought I was just a confused old woman. I'd recorded my conversation with Rebecca at the storage unit. I'd photographed every page of every document. I'd made copies of everything and stored them in 3 separate locations, including one with my lawyer in town, sealed with instructions to open them if anything happened to me. And I'd done one more thing, something I'd learned from my father's old stories about military intelligence. I'd created a false trail, documents that looked real but contained subtle errors, breadcrumbs that would lead anyone who stole them directly into FBI surveillance. The real evidence was safe. What I'd be showing everyone tomorrow was bait layered on top of bait. At dawn, I saw the FBI team take their positions. They were good. I wouldn't have noticed them if I hadn't known to look. Torres called to confirm they were ready. "Remember the signal," she said. "When you need us to move in, say the phrase exactly as we discussed." I remember. At 9:45 a.m., Sarah arrived. She looked worried, exhausted from the early drive. "Mom, what's this about?" "Wait inside, sweetheart. Everyone will be here soon." At 9:52 a.m., Marvin and Rebecca pulled up. Rebecca's face was a mask, impossible to read. Marvin looked terrified. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked as they came to the door. "Inside, all of you." They gathered in my living room, the 3 of them watching me with varying expressions of concern and suspicion. Sarah knew something was wrong, but not what. Marvin was scared. Rebecca was calculating, probably already planning her next move. At exactly 10 a.m., a car pulled into my driveway. A man got out. Medium height, expensive suit, forgettable face. The kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. He walked to my door and knocked. I let him in. "Mrs. Jordan," he said pleasantly, as if this were a social call. Then he saw the others and smiled. "What a lovely family reunion." "Who is this?" Sarah demanded. "Mom, what's happening?" The man ignored her, his eyes scanning the room, taking in positions, exits, threats. Professional, dangerous. "My name is David Walsh," he said. "Though that's not important. What's important is what your mother has promised to give me." "Mom?" Marvin's voice cracked. "What did you do?" I walked to the dining room table and gestured to the documents spread across it. "Everything you wanted, Mr. Walsh, if that's really your name. The ledger documenting 7 years of fraud, property records connecting my son to money laundering, bank statements, evidence that would put multiple people in prison for a very long time." Walsh moved toward the table, his eyes gleaming. This was what he'd come for. But I wasn't finished. "Before you take those," I said calmly, "I think everyone here deserves to understand what's really been happening. Don't you?" I turned to face my family. Sarah looked confused. Marvin looked sick. Rebecca's expression had finally cracked, showing fear beneath the mask. 7 years ago, I began. My son made a terrible mistake. He fell in love with a woman who was running a criminal enterprise, and by the time he realized what he'd gotten into, it was too late to get out cleanly. They stole from 23 people in Arizona. Elderly people, retirees, people like me. "Mom?" Marvin started, but I held up my hand. "They ran. They came here. They built new lives on lies and fake identities. And Rebecca continued stealing from people to pay back the man who'd financed the original scheme. A man named Victor Kozlov." Walsh's expression flickered with something, surprised that I knew the name. "But Marvin couldn't live with what he'd done," I continued. "So he started skimming money from Rebecca's operations, sending it anonymously to some of the Arizona victims. Not much, not enough, but something. Because that's who my son is, underneath all the mistakes. Someone who wants to make things right." Sarah was crying now. "Marvin, is this true?" He couldn't speak, could only nod. "And Rebecca," I turned to my daughter-in-law, "has been playing an even more complicated game. She's been working as an FBI informant for 3 years, gathering evidence against Kozlov while continuing to steal from people. Torn between wanting to end this and being too afraid to stop." Rebecca's face went white. "How did you—" "I'm old, not stupid. I've spent the last week investigating all of you, learning your secrets, understanding your fears." I looked at Walsh. "And you, Mr. Walsh, are the most interesting piece of this puzzle. Careful, Mrs. Jordan. You're not FBI. If you were, Agent Torres would have mentioned you. You're not one of Kozlov's people. They don't negotiate, they just act. So who are you? Walsh's pleasant expression hardened. Someone who invested $300,000 in Whitestone property development in 2018. Someone who lost everything when they disappeared. Someone who spent 7 years tracking them down. The room went silent. You're a victim, I said quietly. I was a victim. Now I'm someone getting his money back, one way or another. With interest. He pulled back his jacket slightly, showing a gun holstered at his hip. So, I'll take those documents, Mrs. Jordan. And then your son and daughter-in-law are going to transfer every dollar they have to an account I specify. And if they refuse, well, I've already called Kozlov's people and told them exactly where to find their missing thieves. You did what? Rebecca gasped. They'll be here within the hour. So you have a choice. Give me the money now or wait for them and see what happens. Walsh smiled coldly. At least I'll let you live if you cooperate. Marvin moved protectively toward Rebecca. Sarah stood frozen, trying to process everything, and Walsh moved toward the documents on the table. This was my moment. There's something else you should know, Mr. Walsh, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Those documents are fake. He stopped, his hand hovering over the papers. What? They're convincing fakes, but fakes nonetheless. I created them over the past 3 days using information I gathered, but I altered key details. Account numbers that don't exist, property deeds with incorrect parcel numbers, a ledger with dates that don't match bank records. If you take those to Kozlov's people, they'll know immediately they're fraudulent, and they'll assume you're trying to cheat them. Walsh's hand moved toward his gun. You're lying. Am I? Check page 3 of the ledger. The entry for Patricia Hoffman. I listed her loss as $145,000 on September 15th, but September 15th was a Sunday, and the bank transaction actually occurred on September 13th. Small detail, easy to miss, unless you're trying to verify the information, and then it falls apart. Walsh grabbed the ledger and flipped through it, his face darkening as he spotted the discrepancy. You stupid old woman. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've done exactly what I intended. I've bought enough time for the real authorities to arrive. I looked directly at him and spoke clearly. It's time to come home now. The phrase Torres and I had agreed on. The signal. The front door burst open. FBI agents poured in through the back. Walsh spun toward the door, reaching for his gun, but an agent had him on the ground in seconds, the weapon sliding across my floor. Torres strode in, her badge out, her team securing the room. David Walsh, you're under arrest for extortion, making terroristic threats, and unlawful possession of a firearm. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of her words were drowned out by Sarah's sobbing, by Marvin's stunned silence, by Rebecca's shaky breathing. Walsh was screaming as they dragged him out. You don't understand. They destroyed my life. I lost everything. I understand better than you think, I said quietly as he passed. But revenge isn't justice, and threats aren't restitution. After Walsh was removed, Torres turned to Marvin and Rebecca. Marvin Jordan, Rebecca Mason, you're both being detained for questioning regarding multiple counts of fraud and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, I said. Agent Torres, I believe we discussed terms. Torres paused, looking at me with something like respect. We did. I pulled out my phone and showed Marvin and Rebecca what I'd been working on for the past 3 days. A comprehensive document, notarized by my lawyer, detailing everything they'd done, everyone they'd hurt, and most importantly, evidence I'd gathered of Kozlov's direct involvement in the money laundering operation. I found what you needed, I told Torres. Transaction records linking Kozlov's accounts to Marvin's legitimate properties. He's been using my son's business as a front for years. I pulled them from Marvin's office 2 nights ago. Marvin stared at me. You broke into my office? I have a key, dear. You gave it to me last year for emergencies. This qualified. I turned back to Torres. This is everything you need to arrest Kozlov and dismantle his organization. In exchange, Marvin and Rebecca cooperate fully, testify against Kozlov, and you honor the immunity deal for Rebecca and negotiate reduced sentencing for Marvin. Torres took the phone, scrolled through the evidence, and I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. This is solid. This is what we've been waiting for. Then we have a deal? I need to confirm with my superiors, but yes, Mrs. Jordan. You've just handed us the biggest case we've built in 5 years. Sarah rushed to Marvin, holding him as he finally broke down, years of guilt and fear pouring out. Rebecca sank into a chair, her hands shaking, and I stood in my living room, surrounded by federal agents and my broken family, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Certainty. I'd done the right thing. Not the easy thing, not the comfortable thing, but the right thing. Torres approached me quietly. How did you know Walsh would come? Because I understood him. He wasn't motivated by money anymore. He was motivated by the need to feel powerful again, to take back control. Men like that can't resist the opportunity to confront the people who hurt them. I just gave him the stage he wanted. And the fake documents? Insurance. If he'd been working with Kozlov's people, the fakes would have bought enough time for your team to move in. If he was alone, they'd confuse him long enough for the same result. Either way, I controlled the outcome. Torres shook her head. You're one impressive woman, Mrs. Jordan. I'm a mother protecting her son, I said simply, and a woman who learned a long time ago that the best defense is a very good plan. Outside, more vehicles were arriving. Marvin and Rebecca were being led to separate cars for transport. Sarah clung to my arm, still crying, still trying to understand. Mom, when did you? Later, sweetheart. I'll explain everything later. As the FBI convoy prepared to leave, taking my son and daughter-in-law to begin the long process of justice and redemption, I stood on my porch and watched the sun climb higher in the autumn sky. It wasn't over. There would be trials, testimony, probably threats from Kozlov's organization before they were all rounded up. There would be healing to do, relationships to rebuild, trust to earn back. But the worst was behind us. The secrets were exposed. The lies were finished. And I'd learned something valuable. Being underestimated was the greatest advantage a woman my age could have. Everyone had looked at me and seen a helpless elderly widow. They'd been wrong. 3 months later, the first snow of winter dusted my farmhouse with white. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes settle on the branches of the maple trees lining the driveway, and thought about how much had changed since that September afternoon when Rebecca had rolled a blue suitcase into my garage. Marvin was serving a reduced sentence of 18 months at a minimum security facility 2 hours away. The prosecutors had honored their agreement. In exchange for his testimony against Viktor Kozlov and full cooperation with the federal investigation, they'd reduced his charges significantly. He would be eligible for early release in 10 months with good behavior. Rebecca had received full immunity. Her 3 years of work as an informant, combined with the evidence she'd gathered and the testimony she'd provided, had been invaluable in dismantling Kozlov's entire operation. 14 people had been arrested across 5 states, including Kozlov himself, who was now awaiting trial on charges that would put him away for the rest of his life. But immunity didn't mean freedom from consequences. Rebecca had moved out of state, into a new identity provided by witness protection. She'd written to me once, a letter that arrived with no return address, telling me she was sorry for everything she'd put the family through. She hoped that someday, maybe, Emma could understand why her mother had to disappear. Emma, my 7-year-old granddaughter, caught in the middle of her parents' collapse. She was living with me now, at least temporarily. Social services had approved the arrangement while Marvin served his time, and Rebecca couldn't be a mother from witness protection. I heard small feet padding down the stairs and turned to see Emma in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Grandma, it's snowing." "It is, sweetheart. First snow of the season. Should we make hot chocolate?" Her face lit up, and for a moment, I saw nothing but childhood joy, untainted by the adult disasters that had reshaped her life. Children were resilient in ways that amazed me. Emma asked about her parents sometimes, and I answered honestly but gently. Her daddy made mistakes and was working to fix them. Her mommy had to go away to be safe. Neither answer was complete, but they were true enough for a 7-year-old to understand. As I prepared the hot chocolate, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. She'd been visiting more frequently since everything happened, sometimes staying for entire weekends. Her relationship with Marvin had been damaged, trust broken by years of lies, but she was working through it, attending therapy sessions I'd encouraged. "Aunt Sarah!" Emma ran to the door as Sarah came in, bringing cold air and snowflakes with her. "Morning, Munchkin." Sarah hugged her niece, then looked at me over Emma's head. Her eyes asked the question she always asked now. "How are you really?" I smiled and nodded. I was fine. Better than fine. After Emma was settled with her hot chocolate and cartoons in the living room, Sarah joined me in the kitchen. "I visited Marvin yesterday," she said quietly. "He looks better, healthier somehow. He's been teaching a GED program for other inmates. He always was a good teacher. His father used to say he had the patience for it. He asked about you, wanted to know if you were managing okay with Emma, with the farm, with everything." "I'm managing just fine." Sarah studied me, and I saw the question forming before she asked it. "Mom, how did you do it? How did you stay so calm through all of that? You were investigating criminals, setting traps, dealing with the FBI. You could have been killed." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat 3 months ago, piecing together the truth about my family. "Your grandmother, my mother, used to tell me something when I was young," I said. "She said that society teaches women to be afraid of everything, afraid of being too loud, too quiet, too visible, too invisible. But fear is a choice, and she chose not to be afraid, even when she should be, especially then. She grew up during the Depression, raised 6 children mostly alone while my father was overseas. She learned that when you have no choice but to be strong, you discover you were always stronger than you knew. But you had choices, Mom. You could have gone into witness protection. You could have let the FBI handle everything. You didn't have to put yourself in danger." I looked at my daughter, this strong, intelligent woman I'd raised. "Yes, I did. Because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, even when they're adults, even when they've made terrible mistakes. And sometimes protecting them means doing things that terrify us." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so angry at him, at both of them. But I miss my brother, the one I thought I knew. He's still that person, underneath the mistakes. People aren't just one thing, Sarah. Your brother is capable of both terrible judgment and genuine remorse, both selfishness and sacrifice. He's human, complicated and flawed, just like all of us. Do you forgive him?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for 3 months. Did I forgive Marvin for the lies, the theft, for putting our family in danger? Did I forgive Rebecca for manipulating him, for using my property to hide evidence, for dragging us all into her dangerous game? "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a process. Some days I'm angrier than others. Some days I grieve for the son I thought I knew, but I'm trying, and I think that's enough for now." Emma called from the living room, asking if she could go outside and play in the snow. Sarah volunteered to take her, and I watched from the window as they built a small snowman in the yard, Emma's laughter carrying on the cold air. My phone rang. Agent Torres. "Mrs. Jordan, I wanted to give you an update. The trial date has been set for Kozlov, April 15th. The prosecutors are confident, thanks to the evidence you provided. And the victims, the people from Arizona? The FBI's Victim Services Division has been working with them. Some of the recovered assets will be returned, though it won't be everything they lost. We've also charged several other individuals who were part of the original scheme. Justice is slow, but it's happening." "What about David Walsh?" There was a pause. "He accepted a plea deal. 2 years for the extortion and threats. He'll be eligible for parole in 12 months. Mrs. Jordan, he asked me to tell you something." "What?" "He said to tell you he understands now, whatever that means." I thought about Walsh, a man so consumed by his need for revenge that he'd become the very thing he hated, someone willing to hurt innocent people to get what he wanted. I'd sent him a letter while he was awaiting trial, not expecting a response. In it, I'd written about loss, about my own experience of losing my husband, about how holding on to anger only poisoned the person carrying it. I didn't know if he'd read it, but maybe he had. Thank you for letting me know, Agent Torres. One more thing. Rebecca wanted me to pass along a message. She said to tell you that she's planted a garden. She said you'd understand. I smiled despite myself. Rebecca, wherever she was under whatever new identity, was trying to rebuild. Gardens were about patience, about nurturing something slowly over time, about believing in growth even when you couldn't see it yet. Tell her I hope it flourishes. After hanging up, I walked through my farmhouse, room by room. Emma's toys were scattered in the living room, a reminder that life continued, that joy persisted even after trauma. Sarah's coat hung by the door, a reminder that family could heal, given time and effort. Marvin's old bedroom upstairs, now a guest room, held photographs from his childhood, a reminder that people were more than their worst decisions. And in the garage, now cleaned out and organized, the space where the blue suitcase had once hidden felt different, lighter. The shadows that had seemed so ominous that night now were just ordinary darkness, and the dust motes floating in the afternoon light were just dust, nothing more. I'd spent 40 years in this house. I'd raised 2 children here, buried my husband from here, and nearly lost everything here. But I was still standing, still tending my roses, still making dinner in my kitchen, still watching seasons change from these windows. The farm had always been more than just property to me. It was legacy, memory, roots that went deep into Pennsylvania soil. My husband had proposed to me on the front porch. Sarah had taken her first steps in the hallway. Marvin had helped his father build the fence that still surrounded the property. This place held our history, both beautiful and painful, and I'd fought to keep it, not just for myself, but for what it represented. The idea that families could survive their worst moments, that home was worth protecting, that roots mattered. That evening after Sarah and Emma had gone to bed, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of tea and the journal I'd been keeping since everything began. I'd documented it all. Every discovery, every decision, every moment of fear and courage. Someday when Emma was older, I'd give it to her. She deserved to know the truth about her family, not a sanitized version, but the real story of how people made terrible mistakes and then tried to make them right. How mothers protected their children. How intelligence and patience could triumph over force and fear. How being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. I wrote one final entry. Today marks 3 months since the blue suitcase changed everything. 3 months since I learned that my son was both better and worse than I'd believed. 3 months since I discovered that I was braver than I'd known. People my age are supposed to be invisible. We're supposed to be passive, helpless, in need of protection. Society teaches us to shrink, to defer, to accept being dismissed. But I learned something important. Invisibility can be a weapon. When people don't see you as a threat, you can accomplish remarkable things. When they assume you're helpless, they don't guard themselves against you. When they think age has made you weak, they forget that age has also made you wise. I spent a week gathering evidence, building cases, setting traps. I manipulated criminals and FBI agents alike, always staying 3 steps ahead. Not because I was special, but because I understood something they didn't. Patience and planning will always defeat arrogance and haste. My son will serve his time. My daughter-in-law will live under a new name. My granddaughter will grow up with questions I'll answer as honestly as I can. And I will continue tending my garden, raising Emma, and living my quiet life on this farm. But I'll never be invisible again. Not really, because now I know what I'm capable of. Now I know my own strength. I closed the journal and looked out at the snow still falling softly in the darkness. Tomorrow, I would visit Marvin at the facility. Next week, Sarah would bring her teenagers to stay for Thanksgiving. In the spring, Emma would help me plant new roses along the fence. Life would continue, different than before but not destroyed. Damaged but healing. Changed but not broken. The blue suitcase was long gone, locked away in an FBI evidence room somewhere. But the secrets it had held had been exposed to light, examined, and finally understood. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not hiding from truth, but facing it. Not running from consequences, but accepting them. Not letting age or gender or circumstance define what you could accomplish, but instead defining it yourself. I was 63 years old, a widow, a grandmother, a woman who had been lied to, manipulated, and threatened by people who thought they were smarter, stronger, more capable than an elderly woman on a farm. They'd been wrong about all of it. I finished my tea, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Through the window, I could see the snow-covered fields stretching toward the horizon, peaceful and still. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be more healing to do, more conversations to navigate, more days of uncertainty ahead. But tonight, I would sleep soundly in my own bed, in my own house, on my own land. Safe, victorious, and finally, completely certain of who I was. Not a victim, not a bystander, not someone to be underestimated. Just a mother who had protected her family the only way she knew how, with intelligence, courage, and the quiet strength that came from 63 years of living, loving, losing, and learning. The snow continued to fall, covering the past with white, and I closed my eyes, ready for whatever came next. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.